Alright, so apologies for the background noise. I'm near the airport. Those are cars though. So I'm gonna today respond to some seemingly contentious comments because I think it's balanced. I don't want there to be an aversion to engaging with comments that are maybe generally perceived as contentious or critical or whatever, because as I always say, it's all valuable, it's all wisdom. Anything that seems to be an obstruction or the antithesis of this understanding that I'm talking about can easily be integrated and converted into pure awakeness, pure wisdom, pure non-dual. Because at the end of the day, we're talking about non-duality, we're talking about oneness, we're talking about not two-ness. Equally, I am aware that, so first I'll put a disclaimer in here, right? I'm not invested in anything that I'm going to talk about from a personal position. I don't really believe anything I'm about to say. I'm not personally invested, personally identified in what I'm about to say as a belief, as held by me, a person, as relates to the because it could be taken as this person here is upholding a belief, upholding a position, upholding part of the identified belief structure, is pushing for a point, is pushing for pushing to try with effort and intention to get other people to believe my point of view. And no matter how many times I say this, it never really fully goes through across the board, obviously, but that's not what's happening here. So I'll precede this by saying that as I'm responding to people, if you're the person that made the comment and you feel like this is a direct criticism on a personal level, or you feel like I'm if you feel it's threatening, or if you feel, let's say, triggered is the word that's used these days, if you feel triggered by this, then I'm not talking to you personally from one person to another. What I'm going to talk about is a belief, a thought, a belief, a thought, not as referring to a person who holds this as part of their identity. So if you feel this to be a personal criticism, just know that that's not what I feel, that's not my understanding of this, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to be taken that way, no matter what I say. So it's just important to hold that in mind and don't take things too seriously. But let's get into it. So another thing is that there are preconceptions about what it means to, as an implication for, on a personal level, this understanding, this recognition, this so-called awakening. That that you can't be contentious, you can't take the piss, you can't you can't engage in debate, or you can't tease people, you tease your peers, all of that. That's all nonsense. The implications of this are nothing. None of it matters. And I've explained this in many ways. The difference between a productive discussion or a debate and a contentious exploration, and what you would call as contentious in the sense that there's a kind of adversarial charged motivation behind it, is the position, is the belief in it, is the identification with it. the feeling, the felt investment in your position as owned by you, your belief as owned by you, your thoughts about something that you may be inclined to suggest is objectively true. I don't feel like that, any of that whatsoever. So when that investment isn't there, there is the freedom to engage in whatever, to express in whatever way, without the limitations of perception and the framework that suggests things have to be this way in order to have insight or have peace or have freedom or liberation or awakeness or whatever. It's just, I say this all the time, it's just not like that. It just doesn't matter. And that's the freedom in it. That's the freedom. So I'm going to directly talk about these comments, and don't take it seriously, don't get personally upset, but at the same time, if that happens, I have no control over that, so it's okay. But I preempt it with an apology for talking sake if anyone does get offended by it, because that's not why I'm doing this, and I'm not talking directly to one person. So Sophia Fake Virus says, a man filming in this car does not have spiritual wisdom to impart. So what is that statement? That statement, I would suggest, is an interpretation, is a belief. And I would suggest, well, firstly, is that true? Yes, I feel that's true. Is that untrue? Yes, I also feel that's untrue. So that I can. I'm not inclined to push for a version of understanding or a version of reality that is superior or better or more clear or more awakened than any other interpretation, because it's just not about interpretations. It's just not about beliefs or concepts. So this statement here is a belief, and I would suggest that in my experience, especially when regarding wisdom, a belief is a limitation on, let's say, the access to, for want of a better term or description, said wisdom. So relatively personal experience, some of the most profound teachings, lessons, recognitions, realizations have come in life through the most unspiritual, quote unquote, seeming sources, seeming situations, seeming interactions, relationships, and people. I would suggest that when we adhere with identification to a certain belief, we limit ourselves, let's say, or we create a self that is limited, that through its own perception, through its own value system, will only be able to have access to wisdom that is qualified by that perception, that value system, that judgment. Whereas I frequently say, all is wisdom. There's wisdom in everything if you're open to it. And I also frequently say that if this is taken, these videos is taken as a me talking to you, giving you a belief structure or a concept, suggesting that there is a teaching here that is coming from me to you, then that's total bullshit. It's complete nonsense, and it doesn't make any sense. So it all depends on who is perceiving, it all depends on who is watching, and it all depends on what beliefs and thought structures are in place that suggest something is a way it is, that something is a this or that. And I would suggest that, at least for me, I found it much more freeing to be open to the wisdom that is inherent in any experience, indiscriminate, and be vigilant in the beliefs that and the investment, the personal investment in those beliefs that limit the access to that limit the that put a value system on wisdom, on teachings, or on learning, on anything in regards to wisdom. To me, there's wisdom in everything equally. All is wisdom, indiscriminate of any specific object or person or concept or word. And there's an immense freedom in that. There's a immense relaxation in that. And not being invested in this and that, and not being invested in the right understanding, the right conditions, the right person. Because again, I say frequently, this isn't about me. This channel isn't about me. But very frequently there will be a interpretation that says that hyper focuses on this character here as an individual, as a self, as a me, or as a you. And this channel's not about that. It's about transcending that limitation, transcending that duality, letting go of the identification and the boundaries and the designations, such that everything is inherently free, everything is inherently awake. The wisdom is inherent in reality, non-stop, to an infinite degree. But it's a very common belief. So, like, when I was consuming a lot of content in regards to non-duality, awakening, and so on, I would judge the speaker, the author, and I would actually actively try and find out about them as a character, so that I could evaluate the efficacy of their teaching, of their message. But I wasn't seeing that was a limitation that I was putting on myself, let's say, or I was creating a self that was limiting it, that had a limited understanding. Like, for example, say a couple controversial ones, Osho and Muji. There is some controversy around them as characters, them in social relations and situations and so on. I'm sure everyone knows about Osho, and there was a documentary on it. But does that mean that all of the wisdom and insight that came from his, let's say, teachings? I know he said he wasn't a teacher, but his teachings are invalidated because of that? No, it doesn't. Because then we're associating that with an identity, and this is just not about identity. It's just not like that. It's so free, so much more free than that, so much less limited than that, so much less than that, so much less restricted, if that makes sense. But it's a very common belief. But I would another good thing to ask is, does this belief, what does it feel like? Does it serve me? What is it motivated by? What intention, energy, emotion is this motivated by? And does it serve me in this? Is it making me feel good? Is it complicating things? Or is it a discernment that is necessary? But equally, everything I just said, everything I say in this channel is a lot of shite. It really is. So find out for yourself. That's the whole point here. Don't believe anything I say, because this is not about beliefs. It's not about beliefs. If that filter is active, everything I say on here, a lot of shite. If you're going to take it as a belief or a teaching from one person to another. The wisdom is in you. The wisdom is inherent in this as it is. Don't limit yourself. So, Shweta Singh says, it's an intellectual idea, a concept. Concepts don't heal people or resolve issues. You are being fooled. So what is that statement? Is that a belief? Is that a concept? So it is confusing, this style of speaking, because I'm talking about something that's not a concept, but I can't directly talk about that, so I need to talk around it. I need to use this weird, contradictory form of language and pointing to point to something, using concepts seemingly to point to something that's non-conceptual. I would just say, don't think about it. Don't think about it. Don't get caught up in the concepts. You'll go round and round in circles, and there will never be a satisfying conclusion to that. The satisfying conclusion is here before all that. It's not a concept. It's not a concept. Early on, I became confused with the concepts. I found it really easy to get caught up in concepts and sense and reason and logic, and this is none of that. This is what you could ask yourself: what in experience is not a concept? What is it making? What makes it look like there is a concept? Thought, belief, maybe. What is non-conceptual? What is more certain than anything that we can say that's conceptual? What's more obvious? What's more simple? What's not confusing? And then in experience, just look for that. I could say you're not going to find it in the mind, you're not going to find it in thought, you're not going to find it in language and writing. But equally, if you pay attention, let's say, the very substance of thought, the very substance of sound, of these words, the appearance of writing, the appearance of thought, before we invest personally in the content of that as a concept, is certain, is real, is simple, is profound. So not the content of these words that I'm saying right now, but the actual words themselves, if not the actual sound, the appearance, this immediate experience right now as it is, before we go into a conceptual framework in the mind, before we get caught up with this and that, is and is not, truth and not truth, being fooled and being certain. What can't be fooled? What is only certain, but equally is infinite in degree of mystery? I think I posted a response to this and said, don't think about it, problem solved. And I mean that, just don't think about it. Easier said than done, but it certainly is simple, and it certainly is that simple. Just don't move the mind. Just stay with what's certain, stay with what's here, stay with what's sure. Stay with what is outside the realm of being fooled, is outside the realm of doubt. And it's right here, and it's always here, and you always have access to it. But what is it that makes that seem complex? What is it that makes that seem conceptual, uncertain? So in these videos, I'm always pointing to experience. I'm always pointing to direct experience. That's the point. And don't get caught up in the concepts, because it's just not about that. Don't get caught up in the interpretations and the identity, because it's just not about that. And this goes for the seemingly not contentious version of this, because it's the exact same thing. So people that may have talked to me that have had an awakening and then believe that that's the result of the conversation they had with me, because there's a special value here that is awakened or something like that, and that's just not the case. It kind of seems like that in the story, but that's just the same thing as we've discussed here. That's a belief, that's an interpretation. All wisdom is inherent, all wisdom is yours inherently. I can't give anything to you, I can't really teach you anything. Awakeness is waking up to itself. Awakeness is awake to itself. Non-duality isn't two. There's no me and you. There's no truth and not truth. Better or not optimal understanding. It's so simple. It's so simple. It's just not. It's about none of that. It's not about any of that. None of that touches this recognition. None of that touches this clarity, this freedom. It just doesn't. It's unshakable. Unshakable. Anyway, I need to go to the airport, but I'll talk to you next time. Any other I'm going to post my email in the description at the top, and anyone can just fire me an email, and if they want to talk in person, private or whatever, go ahead. And I am very busy, as I've said before, but I'll try my best to find time for this for sure. And don't believe the thoughts. I'll leave you with that. Just don't believe the thoughts. See you next time.